So then several of you, I think 4 of you, had this question about questions that were kind of related to the significance of the scientific revolution. For the most part, I just wrote down what you wrote. I condensed it a little bit, but not too much. So let's just go through these one by one. 2 of you had pretty much the exact same question. So, why did the scientific revolution impact social life? We always have to remember that the scientific revolution was a revolution of ideas, but it was also driven by practical needs. So, many of the things that impacted social life were the same things that impact our social lives today. I don't think you heard, but a second ago my phone started buzzing, and let's see what oh, okay, alright, so making plans for tomorrow. So that impacted my social life, that technology. So in the same way, the advancements of the time impacted how people lived, but also what they talked about and what they thought about. We'll get to this on the next board as well, but a big part of this too was during this time period we're starting to see movement away from the church, from religion. And I don't want to talk about that too much right now because again that's the next board, but that would be another thing that I would hint at here, or at least talk about here, is that it started to draw people into different places, or was part of the movement drawing people into other interests. Couldn't we have survived without it? That's a great question. Certainly. Humanity had survived, thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, without the scientific revolution. And I think we could even make the argument, certainly depending on how far you want to go, that people survived better back then, before all of this. They were happier or whatever. In a finite, or in a more easily measurable way, certainly we can point to advancements in, science and technology that have extended our lives and made our lives easier and all that sort of thing. But yeah, that's a really deep question. Like, well, yeah, it depends really, as most things do in any kind of conversation, it depends how you define your terms. What is survival? Is survival simply staying alive? Certainly. If it is, then certainly we could have survived without the scientific revolution. Would our lives today look the same way they look now if the scientific revolution hadn't happened? No. Would they be worse? Well, we can't say. Okay, some of you asked, why focus on astronomy? And some of you maybe missed the point, that's why I have it in parentheses. The second part of the scientific revolution unit that we do is about basically Darwin, so, biology and not maybe anatomy so specifically. Some of you asked about that. But we do, the second part, we look at, well, why, what did we learn about, we humans, I suppose, or life more in general. Remember our 2 questions that we started with, which are, where are we and who are we? And I think the big significance of the scientific revolution, or at least the part that we call the Newtonian revolution, so the understanding that we gained by the time Sir Isaac Newton, had finished, it's very much about this understanding of the world, or I shouldn't say the world, the universe is a much bigger place than we could have possibly imagined. And again, the scope of that, I don't know if you guys see this, I saw on Facebook the other day, it's like an interactive, you click through it kind of picture, and it goes down, 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 down to the smallest forms of life, and then you can click back out, and it goes, out, 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 out. I think every time the scale changes by 10. So it goes, okay, well here's a human size, so what's 1/10 of a human size, and what's 10 times greater than a human size, like that. Anyway, and those sort of things are mind-blowing, and they really make you question, like, wow, what does it all mean? Are we here on purpose? Did somebody put us here? Are we just a result of, random chance? What does it all mean? And again, to the mindset back then, where the dominant mindset was, God had put people on earth to fulfill a certain purpose, to make that that understanding that the universe is much bigger, it started to erode people's belief in that thought, or their belief in whether or not that was true. So that's one of the reasons that we focus on that. And I guess, I mean, in a more practical sense, the reason we focus on that is, well, that's what they were focusing on during this time period. This was a major, what people were concerned about, or what people thought about. Okay, we haven't talked about this yet, but it's good that we have a chance here now. This word science, I think a lot of people think of, safety goggles and white lab coats and, I don't know, Mr. Walsh or Mr. Bota or Ms. Bladenstein up there, or whomever. Anyway, we have to understand the word science doesn't mean like using test tubes. Certainly that's a part of it. That's how we gain science. But the word science itself actually just means knowledge. So I think if you go back through, if you watch the first video and then this one as well, you'll probably see that a lot of times I keep talking about understanding. I keep saying, well, our understanding. This is what the scientific revolution is about. It's not a revolution in using beakers and test tubes and Bunsen burners. It's a revolution in what we understand, how we know the world. So I put some other words here just to kind of help you out. Like, so we see science inside of conscience. Well, if someone says their conscience is bothering them, obviously we don't mean test tubes and beakers. We mean like, I know, I have knowledge that I didn't do something the way I should have done it and I feel bad about it. The word prescient, that's when you kind of have like knowledge beforehand of something. It would be like if I said, oh, and by the way, happy birthday to whoever's having a birthday today, and just so happens that somebody is having a birthday today in class. I don't know. But that would have been very prescient, because you'd be like, oh, it's like he knew that I was having a birthday. Well, again, pre just means before. So this is like having knowledge before an event occurs. This is a term we often use for deities, for gods, and we'll talk about a god being omniscient. And omni here means all, so knowing everything. So keep in mind that when we talk about the scientific revolution, it's about knowledge and where knowledge came from. Which brings us to our last slide. Well, our last little mini whiteboard. So there were some great questions here. I was really excited as I looked at the survey entries and saw these questions. Like, wow, these are some smart kids I've got waiting for me back in South Africa. And so let's just talk. Several of you asked about these kind of themes of, well, what about science and religion? Like, how do they get along? I want to, before we even get to these, I want to make sure that you understand that even though sometimes science and religion are depicted as maybe opposites of each other, many of the people that we're talking about were very religious. If you're interested in that, you can go, study that on your own. And, maybe that's not fair, because religion, that's like saying many people today have Facebook, whether they like it or not. I think Facebook and religion are a bit more, they're not great comparisons. But, religion was very pervasive back then, so maybe it's not fair for me to say, well, yeah, sure, Copernicus, was a member of the Catholic Church, and etc. But anyway, so the first question was, is it possible for science and religion to be interconnected? And I think so. I think both of them hint at this idea of us wanting to know more, us wanting, this human condition of us wanting to understand. Science wants to do that through collecting evidence and being very sure. Religion, I think, tries to do that via faith, via something different than, just collecting evidence. And so yeah, I think there are. You'll watch, I think it'll be when we get to our second part about Darwin, we watch a couple videos where some very prominent members of the Catholic Church are on the video talking about, how religion does reconcile or meld, come together with scientific understanding today. So yeah, I think it is definitely possible. These issues will come up a little bit more when we talk about Darwin. I don't think the Newtonian revolution, yes, it challenged what the church had said. The church had said that, you know, the earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around it. They were wrong on that, but, you know, whatever, people make mistakes. I think when we look at Darwin and the discovery of, well, you know, in fact, people, you know, evolution has occurred, that I think is a much more difficult pill for the church or for religion to swallow than the first. So, you know, we'll see more of that in our future studies. Someone asked this question: what is the usefulness or validity, I added the word validity, of religious teachings as history? What can we know about history from what religion offers? I think we always have to remember that anything that we call history has, you know, it's different shades of gray. Some shades of gray are really dark, and we're like, well, we're pretty sure it happened that way. Others are much more gray, and we're not real sure. So it just depends how much evidence you have. You know, obviously I'm from the western part of the world, so, you know, I'm most familiar with Christianity. But, you know, much of what is in the Bible, I think you can look at and go, yeah, well, it's very historical. So you know, obviously you want to use that in conjunction with other things. There are historians who go back years and years. So the more that you can, you know, find multiple sources of seeing, you know, the same thing, the more that you can trust that it's actually accurate. Okay, I don't know if these two questions are related or not, but I think this is. I think what I said there is probably rather simple. I mean, yeah, sure, we can be pretty sure that you know, the Romans were in Israel at some point. That's in the Bible. It's in lots of other places. That's easy. It's these kind of questions: can heaven be proven to be real? That's the much more difficult thing. We use a word for religion oftentimes. We'll talk about a religion as a faith. And in a faith, well, there has to be a certain amount of knowledge that you don't have. I mean, I can't have faith that when I wipe this away that it'll disappear. That's not faith. I've done it a bunch. I know that it's whiteboard. I know that it's dry erase marker. I know that's going to happen when I do it. Faith is something different. And that's what I was getting to before. Like, I think both of these, science and religion, are trying to satisfy this need of people to understand, and they have to go about it in different ways. If, you know, if you're trying to find out something, you know, heaven, which I guess by definition would be a place outside of the known universe, I don't believe any religion teaches it as a, you know, geographical place like, you know, out beyond that galaxy. Can we know that a place that is beyond what we know exists? No, of course not. And that's what religion is about. So, great questions, really thought-provoking, and I think we need to look at that as well. Not that they're in combat, but really back to this first question of how can they be interconnected. All right, I look forward to seeing you guys soon. I think we're getting close. Bye.